Order. I call Richard Fuller to move the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure, a particular pleasure to serve under your chairmanship to discuss the recent announcements on the Bedford to Cambridge link for East-West Rail. I'm very grateful to the Speaker for permitting this debate and for the attendance of colleagues from other areas that are affected by the decision in my own area. Their areas affected include directly the parishes of Brickhill, which I share with my honourable friend, the member for Bedford, Clapham, Ravensden, Wilden, Wyboston, Chawston and Colston, Roxton and Thamesford, and also of neighbouring parishes that will be affected, including Great Barford, Little Barford and Everton. Now, Mr. Kendrick, Sir Mark, many people think that a railway from Oxford to Cambridge is a nice idea. I include myself as having that thought. I used to think that too. But as I've got into the details of this railway, and as the performance of East-West Rail has rolled out, my confidence and support has been completely eroded. And I'm sure parliamentary colleagues here today will have their own questions for the Minister on this. But I am grateful to the Minister for being here, for his helpful interactions with me. And I will share with him after the debate, if I may, some specific questions that constituents have asked me to raise with him, and perhaps he can then respond to those in due course. But I want to highlight 6 key asks for today. Number 1, will the Minister agree to visit my constituency to walk the proposed route? Will the Minister request the National Audit Office to conduct an inquiry into the East-West Rail Company to provide the independent scrutiny that has been lacking to date? Will the Minister release the full business case and cost-benefit analysis after the theory of change assessment, including all details of anticipated passenger and freight traffic, a discounted cash flow, and a net present value? Will the Minister instruct East-West Rail today to release online more detailed maps so people can actually see what the impact is on their parish, their street, or on their home? Will the Minister instruct East-West Rail to write to all property owners whose home or land is within the current corridor, explaining what the specific impact will be on their home or their property? And sixthly, will the Minister conduct a full evaluation of the current status of primary care, supply and demand in my constituency, and the impact on this of East-West Rail? Now, Sir Mark, the last month's announcement by East-West Rail was supposed to clarify, to be deterministic, to eliminate doubts, and to sideline the NIMBYs, and to propose a great national project of economic growth. It has failed on all these fronts. Instead of a final route, we now have a completely new twist to the story, quite literally, between Roxton and Thamesford. And there is more doubt about the form of traction, or perhaps that is just deflection by East-West Rail. Far from sidelining opposition to NIMBYs, the announcement has galvanised a much wider political alliance that has lost faith in this project, in the company, and which believes there is a greener, better alternative to support growth where we live. I'm happy to give way to Honourable Lady.
On the question of growth, East-West Rail should be a real opportunity for growth, but real opportunities, real problems arise if the surrounding infrastructure is not there and really put pressure on people. So does he agree with me that together with East-West Rail, the government really needs to work with local communities in order to create the additional infrastructure like bus services and GP services so people really see the benefits of that growth?
So, Mark, the Honourable is absolutely right, and that's why I circulated a letter that all parties have signed, calling for exactly that, for a greener alternative that focuses on sustainable growth, that focuses on the work-life patterns that people want, not a 19th century solution that is supposed to unlock growth on an unproven model. And one could sense the political support ebbing away from East West Rail as the announcement was made. The truth is, Sir Mark, the announcement has brought no relief to those most effective. In a rearguard action today, I understand that Beth West, the Chief Executive of East West Rail, has said she will approach government to enable the purchase now of houses that are currently planned to be demolished. This would help people who are already 2 or 3 years into uncertainty. So may I, in addition to that, ask, will the Minister instruct East West Rail to send this advice note to people whose homes or properties are within the proposed corridor, and within that, the expected distance from the rail route itself? That will broaden the clarity to a greater number of people, particularly in the villages affected. Now, the Minister will know that we had elections recently, and he will know that that has brought political change. I'm not sure around the country the political election results were good for the Conservative Party. But in Bedford Borough, the Conservatives, for the first time ever, won the directly elected mayoralty. That was a repudiation of the Liberal Democratic mayor that had supported strongly East-West Rail, such an environmentally destructive route across North Bedfordshire, with phony economic benefits for the town itself. Now, with Tom Wootton as the mayor, we have someone who has a clear determination in his opposition to the proposals as presented by East West Rail. Conversely, in central Bedfordshire, we also have a new leader, an independent whose ward encompasses Tempsford, the site of a station that may herald substantial housing development measured in the tens of thousands. Does the Minister appreciate the scale of interest now in alternatives to this project, given these political changes? Now, I've been contacted without solicitation by many sources and experts decrying the performance of the East West Rail Company. One constituent with expertise wrote to me to say, quote, "From my experience and observations, the insincerity of the process pursued by East West Rail has been its most glaring weakness. In equal measure, however, any such criticism must also lie at the door of the Department for Transport, who appear to be an acquiescing partner in the woefully inadequate activities of East West Rail. Unfortunately, the government as a whole cannot escape association with the feeling of disillusionment generated through continuous stonewalling, lack of logical business planning, flouting of the law of freedom of information, and insincerity of approach." Now, East West Rail, the route chosen, is so full of twists and turns and ups and downs. It surely competes with what is probably our country's bendiest road. I'm not sure if the Minister knows this. The B3081 at Cann Common in Dorset, that, quote, "twists and turns more than many an alpine climb." Words that could be transposed to the route chosen by East West Rail. Now, back when governments and other people knew how to build railways in the Victorian age, of course, they chose a straighter, less hilly route. And I really must encourage the ministers to look at a video from Alison, who is a constituent of the member for Bedford, who very clearly outlines the irrationality of choosing the topography of the route that East West Rail have chosen. And one of the principles behind the campaign group, BFAIR, wrote to tell me the crux of the issue stems from the fact that the NSIP process contains a ratchet mechanism whereby, from the narrowing down of options, precludes a fundamental review or rethink of alternatives when better evidence comes to light about previously discarded options. The starting premise for growth in the ARC was flawed, and the initial public consultation into the scheme in 2019 was so badly handled that it shut out a lot of people and communities who stood to be most impacted by the scheme. And another constituent wrote, expressing the view of many in my constituency. To get to Cambridge, I personally would drive to the park and ride and get on a bus to the centre of the city, not drive to Bedford Station, pay to park, buy an expensive train ticket to get a train which would not take me to the centre. Now, I want to spend a bit of time, Mr. Chairman, on the cost-benefit analysis, because I think it's an open secret here that nobody thinks East West Rail is financially viable. Now, the former Secretary of State for Transport, the Right Honourable Member for Welland and Hatfield, less than a year ago, on the LBC radio show of Mr. Ian Dale, I had the following interaction. Mr. Dale, what would you cut from your transport budget? The former Secretary of State, I would take East West Rail and I would remove. Why haven't you done it already? Well, I haven't had the opportunity. Ian Dale, you're the Transport Secretary. You could easily have done it already. You could have gone to the Chancellor and said, I know you want to cut spending. Here's one way you could do that. The former Secretary of State, I have done that in other ways, but you have just asked what I would do as Prime Minister, and I am telling you, I would cut East West Rail on what's called 2 and 3, so there's the second and third tranches of it, and save £3 to £5 million straight away. He means billions. So, Minister, what would you do if you were Prime Minister? Now, a constituent wrote to me on this cost benefit, as someone who has had the, quote, we intend to drive a railway through your property notice recently, I'd really like to get 2 questions answered, as this document failed entirely to do so. Where is an up-to-date business case? No one has seen one. No one affected believes a valid business case exists. And when will East West Rail engage directly with homeowners on the route to purchase land? And I've mentioned the second point already. Now, East West Rail state in their documents that while the business case is still in development and won't be completed until we've obtained the required consent for the project, so you get consent and then you tell us what the business case is. In the final weeks before publication, the proposals are subject to a cross-governmental approval process. And in Appendix 5 to the Economic and Technical Report, it discusses the quote-unquote economic appraisal, which the report states, quote, compare benefits against costs over the life of a project or for a defined period of time. As is typical for infrastructure projects, the monetized impacts of East West Rail are projected to a point 60 years from entry into service. Both the benefits and costs are discounted and presented in 2010 prices and values in line with TAG guidance. The 60-year value is known as present value. Now, the report concludes, quote, standard approach to modeling and forecasting results showed us that, in conventional appraisal terms, the benefit-cost ratios were poor across all areas, all options. And what does poor mean, Sir Mark? It means a benefit-cost ratio of 0.26 to 0.42. And that's based on the high-growth option. The high-growth option means that the best benefit-to-cost ratio is less than half the amount of money that taxpayers are going to be asked to put in to the railway. What does that mean in terms of cost to the taxpayer? 1.5 billion to 2.4 billion thrown away on a railway. But East West Rail seeks an escape route from this common sense economic appraisal, stating, quote, these early estimates of costs were a key driver of the benefit-cost ratios, which did not account for the transformational and strategic benefits considered later as part of the application of our theory of change. And then over 2 chapters, East West Rail attempts to draw in every possible justification for their project. Talks about east-west connectivity, but doesn't mention the cancellation of the expressway. Talks about housing costs, but doesn't notice that the highest costs are where railways exist. So their proposals are as likely to increase house prices in areas where they're lower than Cambridge than they are to lower house prices in Cambridge itself. And it ignores the power of the market, with private companies already making decisions about where to locate if Cambridgeshire is too expensive. For example, Marshalls, relocating very sensibly to Cranfield. Now, Mr. Chairman, before Parliament, I'd been a partner in a strategy consulting firm, advising large businesses and utilities on investment decisions, and a partner in a venture capital fund, investing in high-growth businesses of tomorrow. I'm a graduate of Harvard Business School, and I can use all of this life experience and qualification to assess this theory of change exercise by East West Rail as complete nonsense. What is the Department of Transport metaphorically smoking if it continues to go along with this economic illiteracy? I may have missed the financial conclusion of the theory of change exercise, but perhaps the Minister can advise if he will release the full financial case, together with all assumptions and sources. And today, I issue a challenge to the Chief Executive of East West Rail to attend a public debate with me to argue the economic case for and against this project, openly, transparently, and honestly. Now, we know, Sir Mark, what the real reason behind all of this is. It's about housing. A constituent wrote to me asking, from the Economic and Technical Report, it is clear that Bedford is viewed as simply a cheaper housing estate, separate from where all the jobs are expected to be in and around Cambridge. So what is in this for Bedford? The real reason for East West Rail, in my view, it is all about concreting over North Bedfordshire. We have the issue of Thamesford with an interchange section with reports of up to 40,000 new homes in a village of currently 400 residents. But also Stuartby in mid-Bedfordshire constituency, where the Economic and Technical Report on page 92 and 93 suggests this railway will open up 70,000 jobs to households. That counts up to about 35,000 houses in my estimation, Sir Mark. Now, I'm not a NIMBY on housing. I think we should all do our fair share. But as the MP for North East Bedfordshire, I have to point out there is considerable pressure on GPs and dentists and school places. And without the investment in that form of soft infrastructure, it is very unwise to support additional housing growth. Very briefly, yes.
Does he agree that it is unfair to call people NIMBYs, like in mid-Bedfordshire, when they raise these concerns, and that they are absolutely real concerns that people need these services that go with growth and with an increased sort of railway line?
I wouldn't do what I understand the Liberal Democrats in mid-Bedford are doing, which is asking people to tell them which housing estate they don't like so they can oppose it. I don't think that's the right way to do it. But for very large-scale development, she's absolutely right. That is where we should have that consideration. I stood on a manifesto in 2019 calling for infrastructure first on these large-scale developments. I don't know if the Minister can give me an update on that. It's not his remit. I don't expect him to, but it's important because he stood on the same manifesto as I did. But we should all do our fair share. And so I looked at the census data, Sir Mark, on the growth in households in the 2011 census and the 2021 census. The national average of the increase in households over that period was 6%. And I think we all feel that rapid growth in our constituencies. Perhaps unwisely, I then decided to look at specific constituencies. I looked at the Chancellor's constituency. He's doing his bit, 6% growth. I looked at the Secretary of State for Transport's constituency, a 9% increase in households over that period, a very substantial amount above the national average. The Minister for Rail, 5%, but we'll forgive him that 1%. But North East Bedfordshire, from 2011 to 21, 21%. 3.5 times the national average of growth in households already putting pressure on GP services, already putting pressure on dentists, already putting pressure on school places. How on earth can I, as the MP for North East Bedfordshire, admit to and allow further pressure on housing growth until those problems are satisfied? I want to turn to the environmental impact. And I had interaction today with Councillor Tracy Wye, who represents the ward, including Potton. And she wrote to me to say that she would like to see a commitment that this will be a project in harmony with the environment, something so future-proof, leading edge and creative. We would be a leading edge in terms of sustainability and climate resilience. I could not agree with her more. I think she's absolutely right. And we have been a bit misled, I would say, and perhaps that's unfair, about the electrification of this line. Originally, as the Minister will know, in the 2005 Railways Act, it was going to be an electrified line as part of the electric spine. In July 2012, East West Rail, the high-level output specification, East West Rail was listed as a new electric railway line. It was then dropped by East West Rail Company, but now in the latest document they say, well, it may come back. Well, Minister, which is it? Are we electrified? Or we're not electrified? Is it battery-powered? Is it not? This announcement was supposed to clarify. On the form of traction, it has done nothing to the sort. Now, I believe the ministers know that the original plans by the noble Lord Adonis in the 2017 report, Partnership for Prosperity, were bogus, and that they have not kept pace with changes in working patterns, nor with our greater focus on environmental issues. That's why a previous Secretary of State cancelled the expressway in 2021, stating that construction of the Oxford to Cambridge Expressway has been cancelled as analysis shows the benefits the road would deliver are outweighed by its costs. Precisely the charge that can be laid today at East West Rail, so why is the current Secretary of State not taking the same action? And a constituent writes to tell me, from a net zero perspective, how could they possibly introduce a new transport link with the intention of running diesel trains on it until 2040 at the earliest? Hardly what you'd describe as inspirational or forward-thinking. And another constituent wrote to me, as someone with long-standing involvement in the biotech industry and academic community, I would question the whole rationale for the railway in the first place. Of course, we all want to consolidate Cambridge's position as a technology hub. But if science and industry in Oxford and Cambridge want to collaborate, they do it remotely. East-West Rail is a 19th century response to a problem for which we in the 21st century have solutions that are cheaper, better, and less environmentally destructive. And I call on the Minister to consider those.
Thank you. I remind members that they should bob if they wish to be called in this debate. The question is that this House has considered the Bedford to Cambridge section of East-West Rail. I now call Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, and I congratulate the member for North East Bedfordshire for bringing the debate. We've had many animated discussions on this subject in the past, and it probably won't surprise him to know that I take a slightly different view, but I do commend him for the very powerful way in which he's represented his constituents, and I suspect others will, because whenever there are infrastructure projects of this type, there are always going to be problems for local constituents, and I have every sympathy with those circumstances. But, Sir Mark, this debate has been going on around East-West Rail, the Cambridge-Milton Keynes Oxford link, the ARC, call it what you will. It's been going on for a long, long time, and I've personally been involved in discussions and debates over many, many years. And frankly, I want to move beyond the debates and get this railway done. I do pay tribute to many who have campaigned tirelessly on these issues, including those noble councillors who set it all in motion many years ago, the East-West Rail Consortium, the role of the National Infrastructure Commission, which the Honourable Member mentioned, and of course the East of England All-Party Group, which I co-chair with the Honourable Member for Waveney. Now I wish to make three main points today around that history, around the purpose of the project, and around the sheer economic and environmental value of getting this project delivered. Now the history first. It has been a long-running goal of rail enthusiasts to restore the lost line between Cambridge and Oxford, made harder of course because some of the old Varsity line route has been lost. But I can remember conversations some 20 years ago at least, when some foresighted people were talking about it, and over time the issue did come to be picked up by local authorities who could see the wider and broader benefits. And by the time I came into this place in 2015, that campaign was picking up pace. And in the subsequent 8 years, I have to say I can barely recall all the conferences, party groups, business czars and leaders who have come and gone, sometimes never appointed in the first place, announcements and then steps back, a bit as has already been described. And I have to say, I fear all part of the rather hopeless way we go about building infrastructure in this country. I remember one budget when the then Chancellor invited members to show up at a surgery-style session with the Minister down in those gloomy ministerial offices that are down the corridor. And the then Minister, who shall remain nameless, looked absolutely astonished that anyone had actually shown up. We actually then had a rather civilised conversation. I think that's when the business czar came and went. And I actually put to him the questions then that I'd been putting for a number of years. What is this line for? And will it be electrified? Answer, of course, predictably came there none. And I'd put exactly that same question about what is the line for to one of the senior civil servants who'd been working on the project at one of the many annual conferences that are held around the subject of the ARC. And I've been absolutely flabbergasted to get the reply that they were planning to consult on exactly that issue, which seemed to me to be rather the wrong way around. And back in 2017, I think, at another one of those conferences, I challenged the then chair of the East West Rail Company over electrification. And he promised publicly that not a litre of diesel would be bought. That's, of course, an issue, as we've heard, that remains unresolved. Although I suppose, given we're still quite a long way off seeing any trains, I suppose it's a pledge that's been honoured so far. Now, at that time, of course, the government was planning to build not only a new rail line, but as we also heard, a major new road. And a considerable amount of time and effort was spent on that. I have to say I always opposed the road for perhaps the same line that has already been used as being a 19th century solution to a 20th century, well, got that wrong, haven't I? Being a 19th century approach to a 20th century problem. Absolutely the wrong thing to be doing, in my view, when we were trying to encourage modal shift. And I'm glad it was finally abandoned. But maybe the Minister may be testing him slightly, but may be able to tell us just how much was spent on that aborted project and how many civil servants are still working on the ARC project. I suspect beyond the Department for Transport and in other government departments, and how long that project team has been going. I seem to have been aware of them for some number of years. We really need to see some output from all that work. Which brings me to my main point. As I've said, I understand the concerns about the route. Personally, I'm glad the southern route has been settled on near Cambridge, because overall it does seem to me the most sensible. But the reason I've been unswerving in my support for this project is because I believe the environmental and economic benefits are significant. Environmentally, we know we've got to move people off roads. It may be that the world is changing, but I think people are still going to, and I think the evidence is rising on this, want to get back to face-to-face contact. I will.
We are in a climate emergency. If people want to really see the benefits of a new infrastructure, they need to see the benefits to the environment, but also to their health. So that the government is not making electrification the main priority. Isn't that really what this line should be about? Electrification.
Well, I served on the Transport Select Committee with the Rail Minister for a number of years. I appreciate these issues are not straightforward or simple, but I think in the end, electrification, the young lady is absolutely right, is obviously the way we should be going. Let's just look at also the time savings for people. In the early morning rush, it can take almost an hour to go 9 miles from Camborne into the centre of Cambridge by car. By rail, that will be reduced to 15 minutes. Bedford to Cambridge by car, as I discovered to my cost a few weeks ago, is 75 minutes, 90 minutes by bus, I'm told 35 minutes by train. And that is transformational. I fully accept that part of this is about the future success of Cambridge, because we are struggling hugely to find the levels of housing for the people that we need to maintain Cambridge's position driving the UK economy. So it's not an unimportant point, although I accept it won't always necessarily appeal to everyone where those housing is going to be located, because Cambridge housing is hugely expensive. We all know that the figures. Development pressures on my city are intense, and we have an acute shortage of people. Ironically, not necessarily the world-leading people, but all the people we need to run the basic services. Even the best scientists in the world require their lunch, and they require an office that's cleaned and maintained. And we are struggling to find those people in lower paid jobs. So we need housing that is affordable. I accept the point that house prices do not necessarily conform always to the kind of economic models some people would like to propose. But we do need housing which is available via quick, reliable and environmentally sustainable transport links. And these are the points that have long been made by leaders of Cambridge City Council, Lewis Herbert and Anna Smith. And in addition to that, it seems to me it begins to open up the prospects for more jobs in high-quality, environmentally sustainable communities along the Arc. And that's an important point. That if we're building these new communities, I'm afraid there mustn't just be a developer's charter. They've got to be the kind of communities that really will attract the people who are going to be part of our future success, both in Cambridge and in Oxford. Now, I accept there'll always be a debate about the economic theory behind how development works and what is the driver in these kind of ways. But I have to say, I'm pretty convinced this has got to be the way forward, and not just along the Arc. As others, including the Eastern Powerhouse, have outlined, it potentially unlocks further opportunities to the east as well. So let me just conclude, Sir Mark, by making a couple of points about the economic significance of and for Cambridge. The region already adds more than £110 billion to the UK economy, and the Cambridge sub-region is a major contributor to the Treasury. Frankly, reinvesting some of that to improve the local quality of life is hardly an unreasonable demand. Cambridge and Oxford are world leaders in venture capital investment with hugely important research and development sites. I believe this rail line can help unlock the physical constraints that are a very real challenge at the moment and help us get the people we need to remain in that world leadership position. There is strong support for this line from local authorities and from the business community, and I was struck by a recent briefing from business-led organisation Cambridge Ahead. This was one of their top priorities. And I know that when the government support seemed to be wobbling a while ago, and I think we heard a characterisation of that earlier, the University of Cambridge was one of those particularly concerned about the prospect that this line might not go ahead. Well, I'm glad that the wobbling seems to have settled, and we have a minister firm in his intentions. And the current version of this government seems to understand the significance of the project. So I end where I began, Sir Mark. There will always be arguments over routes and local impact. But I just urge people to step back and look at the bigger picture and get this electrified railway in place.
Thank you. I now call Anthony Brown.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and it's a pleasure to speak under you in this important debate, and I congratulate my colleague, the member for North East Beds, in bringing this debate. We've had many discussions about this over the years, and indeed with my neighbour, the member for Cambridgeshire, for Cambridge City. I am literally, physically, in between those two constituencies, between Cambridge City and North East Beds. They're border me on either side, and both members in their speeches, and their excellent speeches both, have raised both the pros and the cons of East West Rail as it affects my constituency. My job is to represent the views of my constituents, and the views of my constituents are very split. There are those that are massively in favour in Camborne, as the member for Cambridge mentioned, which is the only town in my constituency currently. They're very frustrated about the amount of time it takes to get into Cambridge City. A lot of them work there. It can take them an hour to get there with the train, and a station at Cambridge South, which the rail minister visited the site of just recently. It will take them 11 minutes to get there and 14 minutes to Cambridge Central, and it will be transformative on their life. But on the other hand, and the business groups in the university are very much in favour of it, and certainly sort of regularly write to me about their support for it. But on the other hand, there are villages along the line where it's all downside and no upside. And the villages of Haslingfield and Harston and Eversden, the Eversdens, and Hawkston and so on, that they actually suffer a railway line going right through them. And the worst affected probably is Highfields Caldecott, which is a village where the rail line will clip the corner of it. And there's housing being built there now, which will presumably have to be knocked down. But also there's many people whose houses, they don't know what's happening to it. I had a very impassioned email from one Jason Weston, who runs the Fortitude Fitness Centre, which is an outdoor assault course. He's built it up for 20 years, and the railway line will go right the way through it, and affecting a lot of jobs. And you can completely understand the distress that it causes to people like that. So the main points I want to make is one, to address whether it's actually needed at all. I mean, in fact, my colleague from North East Beds made so many good points about that, and there's not a huge amount I can add, but also then to raise some of the main issues. The point on whether it's needed, and I've been in discussion with government about this since being elected as an MP, and there have been various wobbles. I was told at one point that it had been cancelled, and we're just awaiting for the announcement, and I was awaiting for the announcements, and then the announcement didn't come, and then it's been re-announced, and that was because the calculation at the time was done under the Green Book methodology, the standard transport methodology, which my honourable friend referred to, which produces BCRs, benefit cost ratios, are just 0.27, which are astonishingly poor, so poor you would never build a transport project like that. But the East West Rail has come up with a new methodology, the theory of change that you referred to. I think this is not the Green Book, but the Magenta Book, talking about the impact it has on overall growth in the area. And certainly this has changed from a project, or mutated as a project, from helping existing people from Camborne to travel more quickly to Cambridge to help supercharge the growth in the area. And in South Cambridgeshire constituency, I don't know quite where it fits in your ranking of, but I know the growth of housing in South Cambs over the last 20 years has been about 3 times the national average, or maybe even higher. We've got in the district of South Cambs, there's 3 new towns. I sort of laugh when my colleagues complain about a new town or 500 houses. I've got, tens of thousands of new houses. There's already planned to be 57,000 new houses over the next 20 years. Really, which is as many in Cambridge City at the moment, doubling that. over the next 20 years. That's what's planned at the moment. And the question for East West Rail then is its business case is clearly predicated on absolutely massive housing growth. And is that in Camborne, I understand, there'll be, it's based on, this is really hidden in the small print. It's so small that you can't read it, you have to interpret it. But it's based on 23,500 new houses in Camborne and 19,000 in Tempsford, just south of St Neots. Now, is that in addition to the existing housing that's already being planned, or is it including that? That makes a huge difference. And that sort of growth obviously has huge impact on neighbouring villages. Like there's a little village of Knapwell, which is a gorgeous village, only 45 houses, but they're very remote at the moment. And they're worried about being, quite understandably, about being completely swallowed up. You also then have to worry about all the soft infrastructure, which various people have mentioned at various points, when you're building on that extraordinary scale. But there is one really binding constraint, which isn't mentioned in this document at all. I think it's 2,000 pages of East West Rail documentation. Haven't read it all, but done word searches. And you put in the word water, and the only time it comes up is in Waterbeach, which is one of the new towns. And actually, we do have, this isn't just some sort of made-up environmental issue that we're sort of worried about what things will be in 20 years' time or 50 years' time. We do not have enough water in South Cambridge to serve the housing that is there and the agriculture that is there at the moment. We have an aquifer, all the water comes locally, it isn't piped in from the rest of the country. Because we use more each year than gets replenished naturally by rainfall, the water level drops. We find the ponds and the rivers and streams will get completely dried out in the summer, which is terrible for wildlife. And we're already building all these houses. I know the Environment Agency is very, very concerned that actually, even on existing housing projections, we just don't have enough water for those houses. I hate to think what their toilets are going to, and showers are going to be like without water. The East-West Rail and Department of Transport really need to be joined up with DEFRA and water supply. There is a plan at some point in the future to build a reservoir in the Fens and pipe the water down. But that won't be there for probably 20 years or more. That's the existing sort of planning structure for it. Will that provide enough water for all this housing? Will you need 2 new reservoirs? How will it fit in? It really needs to be joined up, because you simply cannot build the level of housing that is envisaged in this without the water supply there, and you absolutely need to think about it. In terms of the business case for it, I mean, I'd love to see the proper business case. We keep being told that it will come at some point, but who's responsible for delivering the business case? Is this the Department of Transport? Is it DCIT, DLUC, DEFRA? Who's actually going to oversee it? Are they going to be, who's going to be responsible for the spatial plan? Is it going to be a local authority? Before there's discussion of development corporations, and I made my views on those incredibly clear. I'm not opposed to development corporations in all situations, but if development corporations aren't about press releases, they're about solving a problem you can't solve in any other way. If there is a development corporation here, then you should only do it if it's a solution to an existing problem, and I can't see that that's the case. I can't really see any case for development corporations. One of the main concerns locally is and again my honourable friend raised this, is the exact design, that actually you look through these 2,000 pages and you can't see any of the detail of what the railway line is going to look like, any of the schematics, any of the visions of it, none of the drawings and visualizations, and it's very difficult for the villagers who are impacted by the line to really appreciate how is it going to affect them, how they're going to be impacted. And that is, if you're living right by this thing happening, that is incredibly important to know. It makes all the difference. And I'll come in a minute to some of the issues with the individual villages. But the last sort of main point is the property blight. Now, I mentioned one of my constituents with his fitness centre there, but there's lots of people whose properties have been quite severely blighted by this. People who literally just moved when they found the railway is going to be built next to them and they can't move away again. My honourable friend mentioned that East West Rail have been quite proactive, and I've been strongly pushing them on this to really address the blight issue way ahead of before their statutory requirements, because the law on this is actually, I think, far too in favour of the infrastructure and not in favour of the householders. And they have come forward with a scheme to help people buy properties beforehand if they want to move, and that has come in. But they've got to prove they want to move. They've got a reason to move. They've got to go through through a whole load of hurdles. It should be geographically defined, at least, so if you live within a certain distance of the railway, then you can automatically sell your house. But the other thing is actually giving additional compensation to this. And I think in the UK, our compensation for compulsory purchase is really not generous enough. The value of your house is not just the market value of your house. You've got a business that you've built up for 20 years there. Who knows what the value of that piece of particular land is? I don't know whether they've got planning permission or not, but actually he will have to end up moving his business, etc. That's a huge distraught. I've had many homeowners who've built up their houses over 20 years and made it a forever home, who are suddenly going to have to sell it. I urge the Department of Transport to look at ways of giving people 10% more or 20% more above the value of those houses, because it's really not fair on them to say, you've got to move, we're just going to give you that market rate. In terms of some of the more detailed things along the route, and I just want to say this and put this on the record, because these are the questions that my constituents are asking, and their various campaign groups. I've got lots of campaign groups like Cambridge Approaches that are doing very valuable and important work on this. So I mentioned Highfields Caldecott, where the railway line is literally going through the top end of the village. Is it going under the A428 at that point, which is what they say? I can't see how that can do that, because the A428 is pretty underground, sort of sunken already. Is it going to be, at one point it was going to be a huge embankment 30 feet in the air there, and now is it going to be at that level, or is it going to be a cutting? Because if it's under the A428, which is right next to it, presumably, and it's going under the A428, it would have to be a cutting. These make huge differences to people, but there's no information about that. Again, in the villages of the Eversdens, Great and Little Eversdens, is it an embankment at ground level or a cutting there? Again, no information about that. Halton and Haslingfield, it goes through Chapel Hill, a really sort of iconic local hill. We get fantastic views across South Cambridgeshire, and it's called Chapel Hill because of its historic significance. Is that going to be fully cut into, which was the plan originally, or is it going to be tunnelled? I hear lots of suggestions it's going to be tunnelled, but without actually any concrete commitment. And if it is tunnelled, what way? Would it be cut and covered or bored? There's a possible road closure at Halton. There's a road between Halton and Haslingfield. Would that be cut and severed? Would the villages be separated? In Harston, again, is it going to go over the A10, which is the main road into the south of Cambridge, or would it go under the A10? We've got no information about that. The junction with the King's Cross line at Harston and Newton, at Harston, would that be a grade separated junction with the railway taken right up into the air and sort of back down again, or would they be able to do it at grade, at level, which have far less impact? And what about the road between Harston and Newton? This isn't just a road between villages. They share shops, they share a school, and all the people in Newton, the village of Newton, which is next to the village I grew up in, got a fantastic pub, the Queen's Head, would not be able to go directly to Harston. It would be incredibly disruptive to their life. And that's certainly the last plans that they published, was that road would be severed. In Hawkston and Little Shelford, the railway line goes between those two villages, currently level crossing. Obviously, the Department of Transport guidance now is you shouldn't have any new level crossings. How are they going to do it? There's housing right by it. Is it going to be tunnelled? Is it going to be bridged? Is that road still going to be... The people there are really worried that road's going to get cut in two. And in Great Shelford, so as I get into Cambridge, almost up to Daniel's constituency, Cambridge constituencies, will four-tracking be required? Are they going to have to take apart the Long Road Bridge? And will the junction at Shepworth Branch Junction at Great Shelford, would that be grade separated? Because again, if it is, that will have a dramatic impact on the village of Shelford, because the railway line will have to be taken right up into the air and then sort of back down. If it is grade separated, how would that be? So there are so many questions about this, and I wanted to put them on the record. I've been trying to get answers out of East West Rail. I really think they need to do a lot more to work on the mitigations on this. I know they've done quite a bit already, and I commend them on the work they have done, but clearly they haven't got there yet. And I would urge the government really to look in those areas where they can't do full mitigations, look at to how properly to compensate people for the losses of their homes and their businesses, and not just at the sort of the market rate before the railway was proposed, but actually to compensate them for the loss of their sort of damage and amenity and so on. And finally, I really think the government needs to review this whole thing in terms of housing. And whatever the arguments for East West Rail in terms of making it easier for people to travel from Camborne to Cambridge, it really cannot be used as an excuse to increase the amount of house building, which is already one of the highest in the country, and for which already there is absolutely no water. So I urge the government to think and address all these topics. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to serve on your chairmanship, Sir Mark. And I thank the honourable member, my neighbour from North East Bedfordshire, for securing this debate, which is of great importance to our constituents. I don't believe any people along the proposed East West Rail route are impacted as negatively as my constituents. And it is for them I stand here today in opposition to the route alignment confirmed at the end of May. The proposed 6-track route will impact at least 66 properties in Bedford, including demolition of 37 residential properties based on reasonable worst-case railway corridor width, and potentially more demolitions as part of the station redevelopment. I'm a big supporter of green public transport, so I supported this East-West Rail route in principle to bring much-needed connectivity and growth opportunities to Bedford. But I have always opposed a route that requires the demolition of homes. East-West Rail have said that they reviewed the 4 versus 6-track alignment, but preferred the option that is, in their view, better serves the wider rail line at the expense of homes in Bedford. For years now, many of my constituents have been living under the spectre of house demolition. People's lives have been put on hold. They have been held to ransom by a government who didn't care about them and was too incompetent to make a decision. I sincerely hope they are not further distressed by arduous a process it has been to date if they need to sell their homes. We also need to see far more detailed proposals about what is happening to the land around Bedford Hospital for the new St. John's Station. I hope the Minister will vastly improve their decision-making processes and ensure East West Rail treats people whose homes are being stolen from them with the respect and compassion they deserve, and ensure they get the necessary support and a fair, timely compensation for their losses. The base rate for this should be at least in line with NHS2 plus inflation. I have always maintained East West Rail should be electrified or carbon-free from day one, and I am very disappointed that the government has not committed to low or zero emissions rail. It's outrageous that the government is even thinking about a new rail project that isn't powered by green technology. I hope the Minister will commit today to a green East-West Rail, which will be vital if they have any chance of meeting their net zero targets. I'm very disappointed that East-West Rail have still not published a formal business case. The strategic case and the technical report amount to no more than a glossy corporate dream. There is no detail. We all know that the Eastern region is one of the most under-invested places. So, of course, the growth potential is significant, but citing the economists as recognizing that growth potential as a strategic case isn't good enough. We need a proper business case, and I question why so far it has not materialized, and indeed why we expected to wait for another year to see it. It should be done before the fact, not after. We don't want another HS2 on our hands, with chaos and spiraling costs because we forge ahead with unsound plans before due diligence is complete. I hope the Rail Minister will do more today to prove the business case for East West Rail. And I hope the business case includes the concerns of Bedford businesses around the potential for disruption and loss of trade that building works would cause. These proposals will rip the heart out of strong and vibrant community in my constituency. These are the people's homes. Families have been living in turmoil for years, and now their worst fears have been realized. It feels to many who responded to the last consultation, including myself, that we have not been heard. There are lots of words in the consultation response to say we listen to people's concerns, but nothing has changed. So I hope the Minister will give a commitment today that if the majority of the residents respond in opposition to the plans in the statutory consultation, that the government will listen and not approve the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to the front bench contributions. I call for the official opposition, Tamanjeet Singh Desai.
Thank you, Sir Mark, and it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And my gratitude also to the Honourable Member for North East Bedfordshire for bringing forward this important debate. It is clear from today's debate that it has allowed members from both sides to diligently voice their concerns on behalf of their constituents, and I commend their passion to ensure local people's voices are heard. I do hope the Minister has been listening intently and that he will address the questions posed to him clearly and transparently. Despite being the member for Slough, I am no stranger to Cambridge or Oxford, having studied at both universities, and I appreciate the importance of joining these two great cities by rail. More recently, I've had the pleasure of visiting Winslow Station and also spoken to East West Rail in Milton Keynes, as well as visiting some of the excellent companies in Milton Keynes local to this project, including on the Aylesbury Spur, which would no doubt enhance the Bedford to Cambridge connection. Indeed, the line runs through some of the most productive and fastest growing towns and cities. This area supports, Sir Mark, over 2 million jobs and adds over £110 billion to the economy every year. As Shadow Rail Minister, my support for better rail connections should come as no surprise. As my honourable friend, the member for Cambridge, eloquently explained, connecting our great towns and cities through rail links has been proven time and time again to provide more opportunities, bolster local economies, unite communities, and address the pressing climate crisis. I will always be an advocate for investing in our rail network to make it work for passengers, local communities, and the rail industry, which is why it is so important to address the concerns laid out today in order to progress with this project in a way that benefits local people, businesses, and passengers. Putting it plainly, Sir Mark, we should not have such limited public transport along this route. Currently, travel from Bedford to Cambridge is restricted to an hour-and-a-half bus service. With this new connection, this is cut to a mere 35 minutes. Quicker journey times, emissions slashed by up to 76%, and pressure taken off local roads. The benefits of rail are clear. Those within commuting distance will be increased with a wider pool of talent for businesses and universities, increasing jobs and opportunities. No wonder, as my honourable friend, the member for Cambridge, again eloquently explained to us, that the top 50 employers in Cambridge have written to government in support of this scheme. The aim of this project to deliver people a better and more convenient way to travel locally must be maintained alongside local input, consultation and cooperation, not without it. As honourable members have outlined today, this line covers an area going through a great deal of change and growth. This period of flux will undoubtedly mean significant decisions will be made on infrastructure. Increasing the number of services to meet the existing and growing demand within this region is vital, and failure to provide government funding to ensure these needs are met is simply unacceptable. Across our country, we have seen people struggle to get GP appointments, a place at their local school, or get onto the property ladder, as this is only exacerbated in areas of high growth and development, as has been highlighted by honourable members today. This simply highlights why progress on this project should be completed alongside public consultation with local authorities and local people, ensuring decisions are made to benefit the communities who live in these areas. I feel like a broken record, Sir Mark, when I say that progress on this project has been characteristically slow. Like countless other rail projects on this government's watch, which we've debated in the main chamber and in Westminster Hall. Just last year, this project was rated as red by the Infrastructure Projects Authority's Delivery Confidence Assessment, noting that the later stages of the project, and I quote, appear unachievable. The National Infrastructure Commission, no less, most recently commented, and I quote, the region presents a significant growth opportunity for the UK, but this will be missed if long-term certainty is not provided. It seems the government is lagging behind in all areas. We must build a network for the future. But just 2.2 kilometres, Sir Mark, of electrified track was added to our rail network last year. That's while other European nations and others around the world have been full steam ahead, no pun intended, or full electrification ahead. So why has the Minister not insisted on full electrification for this new route, as has been highlighted by the honourable members for Bedford and Cambridge and others in today's debate? And what considerations has he made of the use of trains that are not diesel only? Like much of our railways, Sir Mark, the government's lack of leadership and dithering has impacted progress. The impact of sky-high inflation on building costs and ongoing government uncertainty have not been unique factors within this scheme. So whilst I am grateful for the department's latest update, I'm sure he can see today that concerns remain. Most notably, perhaps, is the proposed demolition of homes in the constituency of my honourable friend, the member for Bedford, who is persistently a strong champion, a strong voice for his constituents. The Minister should directly address these concerns and meet with the honourable member to discuss these and next steps. This is clearly devastating for the affected communities, as is indeed the case in the constituencies of the honourable member for South Cambridgeshire and North East Bedfordshire. And an updated formal business case should also be published. It's simply unacceptable that we are progressing without that updated formal business case. Clear and effective consultation is clearly the best way forward. The intentions of this project always have been to serve the local community better. So we must ensure that the final project achieves this. Let me reassure, and in fact assure, honourable members on both sides of the House that I will personally be raising these matters directly with the Chief Executive of EWR in my planned meeting with her. EWR indeed must have direct engagement with affected residents to provide all the support that will be needed through this process, particularly regarding compensation and the sale of nearby homes. So can the Minister confirm what action has been taken on this and what coordination there will be with local representatives, whether it's members of Parliament or whether it is councillors and authorities following this recent announcement? Delivering rail projects, Sir Mark, with local communities' needs at the very heart should be second nature to a government in power for 13 years. But sadly, they are more chaotic than ever. We indeed in this region will now have inflicted upon us another by-election, which no doubt the constituents of that constituency will deliver a resounding message as to why they will not be awarding failure. But those that lose out the most from government incompetence are ordinary working people. So I do hope the Rail Minister uses this opportunity to address the concerns laid out today. With our railways readying to go full steam ahead, we can ill afford to be reneging on further infrastructure promises. The people of the North have been betrayed. We cannot allow the people in Bedfordshire and in Cambridgeshire to be betrayed, and we cannot allow passengers to be let down once again. Thank you very much, Sir Mark.
I now call the Minister, Hugh Merriman. Hugh Merriman.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. Can I thank my honourable friend, the member for North East Bedfordshire, for securing this very important debate on East West Rail, Bedford to Cambridge. I have listened very carefully to his representations. I think everyone else in this debate has said. He puts his points with excellence and sets us the challenge. I'm very keen to work with him to address those points. I've noted the 6 or indeed 7 points that he raised. I will go through some of those this afternoon, but I'll write to him on all those points as well. And I want to work with him to ensure that the project is delivered in a way that maximises the benefits for members of his constituency and the country as a whole. And I should just say, Sir Mark, I'm well aware that when it comes to building new railways, there are those that are very much in favour because they benefit directly or indeed indirectly from the delivery of a new railway. We always call for infrastructure to be delivered before the housing. This is an opportunity where that can be delivered. But of course there are those directly impacted, directly blighted by railways who do suffer as a result of the build. I have every sympathy with them, and I'm very keen to work with the honourable member and indeed honourable members here to try and minimise that, and certainly to give as much information, clarity and frankness into the process as we can. I say that, not least to Mark, my family all live in Buckingham and are well aware of the impacts of HS2, so I get it, is what I want to say to the Chamber this afternoon. Perhaps I can just speak a little bit about the project, and then I'll go into some of the details as I go along. The East West Rail project will improve the UK economy, supporting ambitions for the Oxford to Cambridge region to add 103 billion extra gross value added by 2050 and securing the UK's future as a world leader in science and technology. East West Rail will improve connectivity and ensure growth is spread across the region as a whole. The route update announcement that was mentioned, that was laid before us on the 26th of May, set out the preferred route alignment between Bedford and Cambridge. This would serve new stations at Tempsford and Camborne and approach Cambridge from the south, enabling services to call at the new Cambridge South Station and to serve the world-leading biomedical campus. And as my honourable friend, the member for Cambridgeshire South, referenced, I was at that site a couple of weeks ago. It's absolutely fantastic. People are incredibly excited what this railway will deliver, not just in terms of a better connectivity, but actually allowing more jobs to actually flow to the campus and allowing the campus to succeed and take on the world's finest. And I'm very excited to have been able to announce the funding. The route update announcement is a milestone that reaffirms the government's commitment to the project, along with the funding of 1.3 billion to deliver the first connection stage of East West Rail between Bicester and Bletchley. It is part of our national commitment to unlock transformative growth within the globally renowned Oxford-Cambridge hub of science, research and technology, and it will transform connectivity for residents and businesses in addition to supporting economic growth and local housing plans, albeit I take again the challenge that housing can deliver in that particular part of the country. I should say the support from Cambridge University, the biopharmaceutical companies such as AstraZeneca, Oxford University, Science Park and local enterprise partnerships across the route demonstrates the confidence the key stakeholders and businesses have in the benefits of East West Rail. So Mark, with every project of this scale, important decisions must be made to optimise and maximise the benefits it can provide. The proposal to build new stations at Tempsford and Camborne will enable communities to grow, provide opportunities to improve biodiversity and give people increasing access to green spaces, significantly outweighing the benefits that a St Neots station could provide. I recognise, as I've stated, that the proposals will have an impact on some homes and businesses, and in particular I understand the concerns of residents immediately to the north of Bedford Station and the concerns they will have. The Honourable Member for Bedford mentioned the 6-tracking proposal rather than the 4-tracking. This is being put in place to regulate the disruptive performance on the existing Midland Main Line, as well as mitigate congestion and provide options for future growth. It's one of those examples where we are building in for the future, not just of East West Rail, but to deal with a particular spot of disruption that already exists. So by going to the 6-track proposal, we will deliver better infrastructure and a better service on both of those lines. I do recognise it is, of course, more impactful on residents. For local residents that are affected, East West Rail Company has launched a need to sell scheme, which is designed to support those residents with a compelling need to sell their property, but who are unable to do so other than at a substantially lower value due to the railway. And to the point from the Honourable Member for Slough that I should meet with the Honourable Member for Bedford, I did just that very recently, and we discussed one of his constituents' cases that he was representing, and we were able to talk to a solution on that front. I continue to make that offer, to make myself available to all Honourable Members impacted on behalf of their constituents. East West Rail Company, Sir Mark, is also proposing to provide a new relocated station building at Bedford Midland, which will offer opportunities for local authorities to partner with East West Rail to deliver a destination station if supported by third-party funding. Alongside this, the existing Bedford St John's station will be relocated so that it is closer to Bedford Hospital, providing better connectivity for patients, hospital staff and visitors. Proposals for East West Rail will also mean a significant investment in the Marston Vale line between Bletchley and Bedford to provide a step change in the frequency of services. As the House and my honourable friend will be aware, East West Rail Company is holding public information events to answer the questions that have been raised by members on behalf of their constituents, and is also meeting with stakeholders along the line of route. I will take some of the questions that have been posed to me, particularly on the design stage from my honourable friend, the member for South Cambridgeshire, and also get those responses for him as well. A statutory consultation is planned to take place in the first half of next year, where the next stage of technical and operational design proposals will be presented, alongside plans to mitigate any associated environmental impacts. East West Rail Company has committed to delivering a 10% biodiversity net gain across the entire project, and traction options such as full electrification along the whole line of route are currently being reviewed. I'll just touch on that. So, of course, the existing Phase 1, which is the part that goes from Oxford over to Bletchley, is, of course, a mix of an existing line and once was a railway line. Phase 2, that goes from Bletchley to Bedford, is an existing line. So, in that sense, it's a more difficult challenge in terms of electrification because bridges and other infrastructure matters are already in place and would have to be significantly changed. Where we have built in new bridges, new infrastructure, we have done that with electrification for the future in mind. So it does have that pathway available to it. And of course, we look with the future towards hybrid options as far as trains are concerned, with the ability to make for a better decarbonised line of route. So I'll just touch on that because I know all honourable members have mentioned that. And then when it comes to the business case, which has been referenced, as is standard for the project of this size, a final business case will be put forward once planning consent is secured, and prior to this, a development consent order application will be prepared in accordance with the 2008 Planning Act. East West Rail demonstrates the government's commitment to supporting growth and to improving connectivity for people and businesses across the Oxford to Cambridge region. Now, let me come to some of those points that were raised. We were working hard on this side to try and provide as many as we can. The first question is, will I walk the line of route? I'm not sure whether that's an invitation to walk the entire line of route or selected parts of it, but I'm certainly able to say yes to the former, and then if we had more time, we could say yes to... sorry, I should say the latter, not the former. We'll get that right for Hansard. So yes, we will walk parts of the line of route, so my honourable friend can show me the parts impacted, and indeed, we did something similar when we were looking at the options of coming into Cambridge from the north or Cambridge to the south. So that's something I've done for Cambridge. I'll, of course, do that in his constituency. And also with regards to, he mentioned, my honourable friend mentioned the new mayor, Tom Wootton. I've met with him, and he has still laid out his challenges in terms of why he believes the line of route should come through the south rather than north of Bedford. And I've said that I'll write back to him and explain our thinking behind that. I'm, of course, very happy to continue to liaise and discuss with him. I think the transparency and making sure that our case is the strongest case and cannot be rebutted is not only open and transparent, it also means it's subject to the challenge which will make it more robust. So I'm very keen to do that. He also asked if the National Audit Office would conduct an inquiry. We can consider this as an option. I've always enjoyed working with the NAO when I was chair of the Select Committee. They have a lot of value to add when it comes to making sure projects are built to time and cost. What I would say is external assurance is provided by the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. Their next review is expected before the statutory consultation. So they work as an external review body for the project. He asked me if I could instruct East West Rail to release maps. We can check and see what further information and detail can be provided. East West Rail doesn't yet have a detailed design for every single area. Where it has got the details to market, will actually publish. But I'm very keen, and it has done so in the Poets area of Bedford, as an example, I'm very keen that we do so at the earliest possibility so that we can give those residences and businesses who are impacted on the line as much clarity and detail as possible. So I will look back on that particular point for him. His fifth point was writing to property owners on the current corridor. East West Rail has written to these property owners about the route update announcement, and they'll engage with them further in the lead up to the statutory consultation. But again, I'm committed to ensuring that more detail is provided. I will come back to him on all of these points, but also the points that I haven't addressed because I haven't had the time, for which there are one or two. Honourable Member for Cambridge asked me how much money has been spent on the Oxford to Cambridge road that was proposed and then stopped, and how many officials are still working on it. I can tell him that £28 million was spent on the development project, and there are no officials working on it right now. So I hope he's impressed with that transparency and immediacy as well. I'm asked by my honourable friend, the member for Cambridge South, who is going to be responsible for producing the business case. That is East West Rail, but they will do so in partnership with the DFT, and we will work very closely with the Treasury to make sure that that is properly done and in the manner that one would expect. There was talk of the theory of change exercise. That is an exercise that is actually validated by government as a methodology. And we have, I know, previously discussed the Green Book and the fact that it is not particularly ripe for taking into account regeneration and decarbonisation. I should get it in that order. Those changes have actually now been made, which I obviously welcome because they make transport, and certainly rail projects, much higher to score. But we'll, of course, ensure that that is rigorous and also transparent in terms of its preparation. And I note my honourable friend's expertise in this area, his academic background and his business work. And I'm very keen to work with him to ensure that business case works and is the right form as well. So you can take that assurance. Honourable Member for Slough visited Winslow. I visited there too. And not only did I visit there, I was actually brought up a few miles away. And the reason why I'm a supporter of this project is that every day when I used to go to Further Education College in Aylesbury, I used to go over that bridge, and there was nothing going on underneath it. Now, as he's aware, there's a station that will be ready to be opened very shortly. And off the back of that, we have the housing. Off the back of that, we have the school. The secondary school closed down in Winslow, actually, when I was at secondary school in Buckingham, and all the pupils had to be shipped over, bussed over, I should say, to Buckingham. That no longer has to happen, and it's the railway that's allowed that to be built. So Winslow is a good example of, if you build the infrastructure, then the rest follows. I'm keen to work with him because it's clear that he supports East West Rail and wants it delivered. And so I support his support, as it were. And he talks about the electrification miles that have been built. I think it's right that I correct the record here. So in the last 13 years, Mark, whilst we have been in government, 1,200 miles of railway has been electrified. In the previous 13 years that the Labour Party were in power, the figure is a paltry 63 miles. So I'm sure he won't take any sort of lessons, won't wish to give me any lessons, I should say, on how to electrify lines, because we're doing so. I know he's going to now intervene on me and tell me that he's going to do a lot more in the future, but the trouble is we've only actually got his past record to actually judge him on rather than future deeds. But go on, have a go.
On that point, Sir Mark, I would like to actually rebut what the Minister has just said. What I referred to is what has been electrified in the last year, which is a mere 2.2 kilometres of rail line. He's right to point out about the record of the Conservative-led governments in the last 13 years. he will also be aware of the fact, having been chair of the Transport Select Committee, that the previous Labour government, their main priority was to invest tens of billions of pounds into our rolling stock to make sure that we got rid of the old inefficient trains which we had earned from the previous Conservative government after their 18 years of grinding public transport to a halt. So having got the rolling stock back up to full speed, the last decade, Sir Mark, has been a lost decade in terms of electrification, because that is what the other European governments have been doing. So that's why I said that the Minister and the Conservative government have been failing in terms of electrification.
Well, that was more than an intervention. But, of course, the reality is... I'm impressed, actually, with that argument, that actually, rather than sort of electrifying lines, which is, of course, I'm a big supporter of and doing more of it, and we want to do more, we'll do more of it. We've done 1,200 miles, and as I pointed out, the previous 13 years of Labour had done 63 miles. But to actually tell me that it's because there was a priority focus on rolling stock, I'm sorry, is really pulling the other one. We have actually been doing both during that whole process. And he's been on an Azuma train. He'll actually know full well that these have been delivered under our... Well, Sir Mark, of course, I'm happy to do so, but I obviously had such a long intervention, I thought you might give me the grace of replying fully to it. But I think the point's been made as far as that's concerned. Overall, Sir Mark, I just want to say again, we are committed to this project of East West Rail. The Honourable Member for Cambridge set out the sort of case that's recognised there. Perhaps if I could just make a little bit more progress, then I'll perhaps give away one final time. We are committed. I do fully recognise, and the Honourable my honourable friend mentions the housing challenges in the area. I recognise that because of having family and being brought up between Oxford and Cambridge. I see that every single time I go back. He's right to sort of prod me at the figures. My own constituency, we have 85% area of outstanding natural beauty. I would actually like to see more development so that we have the housing and indeed the infrastructure and resources where I am, and that we actually spread that load more equally as well. But I do recognise the points that most of the honourable members have raised here, that the housing will then actually cause potential impacts on their constituencies, and I do appreciate that. But I also just come back to the point that the honourable member for Cambridge had made. We've got to make sure that cities like Oxford and Cambridge can compete not just in this country but internationally. And it's absolutely vital that the scientists, the entrepreneurs, the innovators there that are coming up with some extraordinary cures that will actually help not just people in this country but around the world have the support to do that. At the moment, they do not have a workforce. So the idea of this line is to deliver a workforce to Oxford, to Cambridge, to utilise Milton Keynes, to allow towns like Winslow to actually grow further, get their schools in place. And this, in my view, is a good example of rail delivering for the regional economy. And I truly believe it will do that. But as I say, I know the impacts. I understand them. I want to work with honourable members across the piece on behalf of their constituents so that they feel more reassured, they understand what's going on, they get the detail, they get the reassurance, where needed they get the compensation, and that we make this project work for them as well. I'll take one final intervention and then I'll conclude.
You mentioned statutory consultation earlier, which is going to take place from January next year, but my constituents are thinking that this is tick box exercise because they think that the decision has been made already. If he wants to prove my constituents wrong, can he commit today, which I made this point in my speech as well, that if the majority of the people taking part in this statutory consultation go against these plans, he will make sure that he put hold on these proposals. Prove my constituents wrong, if you can.
Mr. Mark, that's not a commitment I'm able to give, because as we know, those that tend to write back on consultations tend to be the most impacted and therefore the most troubled by it, and that's just not the way we would run a consultation. But of course we've set out a preferred line of route, of course we've set out the ambition that this railway can deliver, but I can give him this assurance, and I say this as a former chair of a select committee, consultations that are run in my department under my name will be properly run. We will look at all of the responses that come back, and where we can make improvements, because residents have come up with really good ideas that will actually be a win for everyone, then that's what I would be expecting to look at very closely and work with those suggestions. So it will not be a tick box exercise for as long as I'm responsible for this project. I can give him that assurance. So Mark, I should wrap up. I would, as I've stated, encourage my honourable friend and his constituents to continue to use the opportunities provided through East West Rail Company's community events and their forthcoming consultation to provide feedback on the plans. But I would like to conclude by thanking you, Sir Mark, thanking all of those who have spoken with passion and expertise, and give that commitment from me that the Department for Transport will work very closely with all of the MPs who are represented and have concerns. And I hope to then assure those that have the most striking concerns and deliver for those that believe, like me, that East West Rail can be the power of good for the region. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Minister. I now call Richard Fuller to wind up, cognisant of the fact that there's likely to be a vote at or just around 4 o'clock. Thank you.
I'll try not to detain you for 10 minutes, Samar, but we'll see. I'd like to start by thanking the Minister and the Shadow Minister and all the honourable members who have spoken, plus the honourable member for Bath, who's no longer in her place, but made useful interventions. We certainly had a variety of views on it, a diversity of views. But I think there was one thing that united all those from the backbenches that were speaking, that diesel really is a non-starter on this railway. And until the Minister, until the government resolve on that issue, I think they're really pushing a plan that will further erode public support. The member for Cambridge made, I think, the crucial point here, which is the goal of this investment really is to try and build on the strength of Cambridge. We're very lucky to have the academic, technical, and innovative skills in and around Cambridge, in the science parks, in the university. And that hub of activity is something that has a national benefit to all of us. And I completely agree with him. And I agree with him about the importance of being able to provide the accommodation for people and the support for that potential to be fulfilled. I do not believe that East West Rail is the smartest way to do that. I believe there are greener, better alternatives, a better use of public money to achieve that. And if we could engage on that rather than blindly going down this, we've already thought of it 10 years ago, so we have to keep thinking about it route, I think we'd get a better answer for Cambridge. My honourable friend, the member for South Cambridge, have made a really crucial point, which is that there has been inadequate attention paid to the water supply in East Anglia region. This is not a marginal concern. This is a very substantial concern. And like my honourable friend, I've spoken to the experts in this area about their plans going out 20 or 30 years. And even with all the effort they can make with new reservoir, with desalination plants, we're going to run out of water in the eastern region unless there are other additional plans. And the potential for more housing has to be borne in mind about that. It's just to bear that in mind before we could take that any further. The honourable member for Bedford spoke with great passion about the members in his constituency, which I know well, who have been given a notification, and about the need for compensation and support. And my honourable friend from South Cambridgeshire also emphasised how in this country we're not very good at the way in which we manage these issues for people, either necessarily in the quantity of amount, the process for assessing the value of properties, or the timeliness of it. And it was kind of the CEO today of East West Rail to say that she will see if there are things that can be done. And I think if the Minister can take her up on that and see what can be done, that might help for those being concerned. But there is, as the honourable member for Bedford said, new additional uncertainty about the new station at the hospital and what that will mean for his constituents and for the town of Bedford. Now, the Shadow Minister made some very strong points. I shan't pick up on all of them. I always love it, Sir Mark, when you hear people say they really like something. And the Shadow Minister said that there were 50 businesses who'd written to the government to say that they supported East West Rail. Well, it's always easy to support something when you don't have to pay for it. And so my question is, would those 50 businesses write the same letter if we said that we were going to tax their profits until we made up the shortfall for the taxpayer of 1.5 billion to 3 billion pounds? I wonder if their support would be quite so evocative if they had to pay for it. Because in the good old days, people used to say, I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet. I'm going to pay for things myself. So perhaps the Minister should look at ways in which the shortfall can be reduced to the taxpayer by charging the businesses who say they're going to benefit. I'd be interested to see his thoughts about that one. On the updated business case, again, the Shadow Minister to raise this, he talked eloquently about the support he had for rail projects. Well, at the moment, this rail project has a benefit-to-cost ratio of basically 26 pence in the pound to 52 pence in the pound. Now, I wonder if that is Labour's assumption of what a good value for money for a taxpayer is. That's the benchmark that we should anticipate Labour spending that £28 billion a year. That would assess to something like a £20 to £50 billion a year loss to the taxpayer. Now, I really think Labour need to sharpen their pencils on what is a beneficial return to taxpayers and not give such an easy pass if benefit-to-cost ratios are as low as that of East-West Rail. The Minister, I'm very grateful for the Minister for his responses, and particularly for his willingness to walk the entire route, which I'm happy to say we only need him for part of the route, and we'll find a date where he can do that. He says that the announcement is a milestone. I fear it's a millstone. I don't think this is the right way to unlock growth, but I understand that that's a different view from the view of government. It was disappointing, if I may say, Minister, that there was no more openness in coming forward, or pressure from the Minister. Sorry, Sir Mark. There was no more pressure from the Minister on East-West Rail to debate and be open on the business case, because, as many members have said, that there is no clarity about what this business case is. And I think it would help people think and understand that there is greater transparency if there was the opportunity to discuss that openly, which is why I issued my challenge to the Chief Executive that I'm happy to debate it with her in my constituency at some time. The Minister also talked very kindly about the impact of housing. I'm very grateful, housing growth. I'm very grateful for him to say that. And he talked about his own constituency that has a large amount of areas of outstanding natural beauty. And I know that the Honourable Member for Cambridge and Cambridgeshire has a significant amount of area that has greenbelt protection. I'd just like to make this point. We in Bedfordshire love our countryside too. It may not be classified as areas of outstanding natural beauty. It may not be protected by greenbelt. But we love it, we want to protect it, and we don't want to see a railway and more housing driven through it. The announcement, Sir Mark, by the East-West Rail, sadly, has taken us backwards. It has left too many unresolved issues and too much controversy and uncertainty. There is much more work that needs to be done before it gets any support from me.
Thank you. So, the question is that this House has considered the Bedford to Cambridge section of East-West Rail. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it.